Good evening, America, and welcome to the Monday edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, John Solomon, reporting to you back in the nation's capital. Yep, back from the Moms for Liberty conference in Orlando, Florida. Had a great time there. Got back to Washington, another very busy day with President Trump. The president met with Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese earlier today, and what happened during that meeting was a big response to the Chinese Communist Party and its leader, Xi Jinping. The president and the prime minister signed an agreement on rare earth minerals, which China is increasingly trying to control in the world economy. This is a national security issue. President Trump got a big deal today. The president said he's been working on the deal for about 4 to 5 months, and Australian Prime Minister Albanese confirmed that Australia has an $8.5 billion pipeline of those minerals ready to go for the deal. Australia is a big part of Washington's China containment strategy in the Indo-Pacific, and the two leaders also reportedly discussed more ways to increase defense cooperation in the region. A little bit ago, some breaking news. A near shooting was averted at Atlanta's major airport. By the way, that's the busiest airport in the nation. A man with a gun was stopped before he could begin shooting when his family tipped off police. Police have charged him with making terroristic threats and many other crimes. He also is a convicted felon, so they're taking a look at how did he get that gun. We'll get you up to speed on that over at justthenews.com. Be sure to check it out. All right, moving on now to some more good news for the Trump administration. It came from the courts today. In fact, the Ninth Circuit Federal Courts Appeals Court, which is one of the most liberal, it gave the president the green light to send the National Guard into Portland, Oregon, by lifting a previous court order that blocked him from doing so. The administration had actually been blocked twice from deploying the Guard to Portland, and the president is looking now to send in those guardsmen and guardswomen amid heavy protests to protect an ICE facility where protesters have already been clashing with federal agents. And as some elections around the country begin to tighten, especially in New Jersey and Virginia, a new poll out by Rasmussen shows that the favorability for the Democratic Party has now fallen below the Republicans. That's not a good sign. Normally, Democrats, being the minority party, would be rising in a midterm election. That's not the case right now. The poll found that 48% of likely U.S. voters view Republicans favorably, while 45% view Democrats favorably. And what's even more impressive, if you're a Republican, and perhaps depressing if you're a Democrat, these numbers were recorded in the middle of the government shutdown. So it seems voters aren't blaming Republicans for it. All right, let me turn to my amazing co-host, Amanda Head. She's still out in California, where she was covering the incredible Marine 250th birthday this weekend. Amanda, you've been watching a lot of news too. What's on your radar?
Well, and John, just to add a little flavor to what you were saying, if money talks, and we all know it does, Republicans had record-breaking hauls coming in for their congressional money pots, we shall say. So I think it was in the tens of millions, 20-something million. So it's looking pretty good for Republicans, at least as of right now. But today, a lot of humor in the cabinet room today as President Trump met with that Australian delegation. He was asked by a reporter about an Australian ambassador, Kevin Rudd, his previous criticism of President Trump. That ambassador was actually in the room sitting at the table, and this happened.
Even the things the ambassador said about you in the past, the Australian ambassador?
I don't know anything about him. I mean, if you said bad, then maybe he'll like to apologize. I really don't know. Did an ambassador say something bad about him? Don't tell me. I don't. Where is he? Is he still working for you?
Yeah.
You said bad?
Before I took this position, Mr. President.
I don't like you either. I don't, and I probably never will. Go ahead.
A very, very lighthearted moment, and I hardly believe, having been around the president and hearing comments like this, I hardly believe that President Trump means what he says when he says, "I'll never like you." He seems to warm up a room anytime, even if it's the opposition. And also, moving on to something that we're going to be discussing with our very first guest of the night, Trump has warned Hamas again, saying that we will eradicate them if we have to.
We made a deal with Hamas that, they're going to be very good, they're going to behave, they're going to be nice, and if they're not, we're going to go and we're going to eradicate them if we have to. They'll be eradicated, and they know that.
And there were many, many Americans who voted for President Trump because of his success during his first term of not only having no new wars, but bringing troops home. For a lot of folks, when they hear that, they think, oh no, that means more treasure, American troops on the ground. And President Trump explained what he meant by that, and it's not what you might think.
Does that include American boots on the ground?
No, it won't be on the ground at all. We don't need to, because we have many countries, as you know, signed on to this deal. The way I view it, 59 countries, and unanimous. We've had countries calling me when they saw some of the killing with Hamas, saying we'd love to go in and take care of the situation ourselves. In addition, you have Israel would go in 2 minutes if I asked them to go in. I could tell them, go in and take care of it. But right now, we haven't said that.
And John, I think what a lot of folks would argue about this president, whether you agree or disagree with him on domestic or foreign policy issues, President Trump has been very successful in building that ally infrastructure there in the Middle East, such that we can have our allies there taking care of these issues without us having to step in and commit hundreds or even thousands of troops.
Yeah, coalition of the willing, and also a president who really means what he says and says what he means. I know an Iranian general and some Iranian scientists that posthumously could affirm that. I mean, the president, when he said he means it, he delivers on it, and there's no doubt about it. All right, joining us now, a great national security expert. So much to talk about. Senior research fellow at the Heritage Foundation and former White House Deputy National Security Advisor to the Vice President, Steve Yates. Steve, great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to join you.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. All right, so this weekend, a little bit of a test of the ceasefire, though it seems like it has relaxed a little bit today, but some Israel strikes after there was some Hamas violence in the area. I know this is going to be inch by inch, moment by moment to keep this peace deal going. Tell us what you see in what happened this weekend and where things are today.
Well, when the world was celebrating, I strongly supported the celebration. A tremendous amount of work went into getting us to the point of having a deal to work on and to begin implementation. But as we were celebrating that, I tried to caution a lot of friends that, after all, Hamas is a terrorist organization, and every step along this 20-point plan is probably going to be contested and challenged. It's just how they operate. And frankly, it's how a lot of bad guys operate. But the president alluded to it in his remarks. The insurance against it going astray is the coalition that he's built up. And the beauty of it is manyfold, but it's obvious that President Trump and his leadership in the United States is not isolationist. It's also obvious it's not unilateralist. It's actually good for allies and building these coalitions of allies to tend to these gardens in their own region. And I refer to them as gardens on purpose because they require constant gardening. And that's what is going to be required in this. And so I think he's right to turn to the Abraham Accords countries, and hopefully those accords will expand. But that's what it's going to take to try to keep Hamas in a box. But if they stray, he's the most transparent and clear president there's ever been. They should have no ambiguity about what will happen.
Yeah,
well, and
sure.
I love your cautious optimism when it comes to the approach of this deal and its success, because we've all recognized the fragility of it. But this deal has gotten further than any other when it comes to the signs that will augur success at the end of the day, step by step, at the end of all of these 20 steps or so. What is the sign that you're seeing right now that even though it's being tested, it still will stand the test of time?
I think once we see a coalition partner actually on the ground enforcing security guarantees, that will be a really, really positive indicator that the philosophy that, people really have lost perspective of how wildly different President Trump's approach is, not because his approach is wild, but because of how far astray we had gone in recent years with just unilateral invasion and occupation on one hand, or just feckless diplomacy on the other. He's proving that there's a wide middle ground about how to use power that we have and leverage relationships we have to bring about alternatives to peace and prosperity. So it's the involvement on the ground by those coalitions that, to me, will prove this is not just Israel, this is not just the U.S. and Israel, and it is something that there's real buy-in by the so-called international community.
Yeah, so remarkable. Buy-in also from Australia and some of our other allies in the Indo-Pacific to building that coalition more strongly against China, particularly when it comes to the stranglehold on rare earth minerals, which are so important to the AI revolution ahead of us. How big a deal was today's deal? And also, how important is it for the United States to begin its own mining too, so that we can back up whatever Australia, Canada is going to give us and make sure we have our own supply one day?
Well, I think today's news is very, very important and very, very significant. It's a frustrating topic to me because in 2010, China threatened to do something similar along these lines to Japan, and Japan began a process of adjusting. But for whatever reason, our tech leaders in the private sector decided it better to sleepwalk for 15 years for the most part until we started to see that China is serious about using this leverage. Now, I happen to believe that China might have learned that they've overplayed their hand. They probably can't play this again because I think they've reached a point where the United States, even at a cost, is absolutely determined to develop our own capabilities. But the dirty little secret is that the climate change theology that we've been following is part of the problem. Processing of these materials is almost 80 to 90% controlled in China because it's dirty to process. And so people export their dirty carbon to China as the world's leading polluter in order to pretend that they've gone green, and it creates this vulnerability there. So this is a step in getting access to the materials. We still have to wildly accelerate on the processing, but that's where the permitting reform and speeding up these pipelines for mining to delivering to our own industry is vitally important. I know the administration is committed to it, but this is really a race we've got to hit into overdrive now.
Absolutely. Well, and sir, there's also a defense aspect of this agreement. Australia committing to purchase over $1 billion of unmanned underwater vehicles. So you have that aspect of this agreement that further fortifies them as a defense partner. But does that also serve to bolster the mineral aspect of this deal as well?
I think it makes an alliance more of an alliance. So, I mean, the Australians, like a lot of powers, have had a foot in both shores. They have sought a close economic relationship with China, where they actually have a surplus in several areas, and they want to have the benefit of American security. That's an imbalance that got painful in Europe, and President Trump spoke loudly about it. And he wants our allies to be all in with the American ecosystem, economic security, and national security. And so this investment that will come to the U.S. supply chain is vital in making a down payment on that commitment. And I think that it's actually quite good for Australia itself. I mean, their politics have been influenced by malign influences of the CCP. And they've struggled in recent years about getting their bearings. And on the final point on this, the Australians were very sensitive about the tariffs that were imposed upon them. The president was explicit in his meeting that moving in these defense areas that matter, investment in the United States that matters, that will definitely be taken into account as they look at the tariffs. And he tried to emphasize that Australia faces lower tariffs than others.
Yeah, it's so remarkable to see how quickly tariffs have become such an important tool in the foreign policy and diplomacy realm. It really is something to see. Steve, I want to turn to something else. I spent some time over the weekend with some counterterrorism officials at the White House. Some jaw-dropping numbers we're going to be able to put out there in a couple of days on the total number of jihadis and others who've been killed since President Trump reclaimed the White House. Big win on Islamist terrorists, but also big win against narco-terrorists. Your thoughts about the reinvigorated counterterrorism operations of the United States?
Well, to me, this is fundamentally saving the republic and saving our families and our communities. I mean, it really began with being serious about securing our border, but then it really is comprehensively across the homeland security spectrum, securing our communities. But then when it gets beyond our shores, the president and his national security team have been deadly serious about pushing back a lot of these threats. Now, when it comes to the narco-terrorists, number one, he began by identifying the cartels as terrorist organizations. It escapes my mind why that hadn't happened already, because if there's been a weapon of mass destruction detonated inside America, it's, in my mind, been chemical weapons on the American public by way of drugs. And so I applaud the administration for doing these things. And basically blowing these ships out of the water is one of the ways of doing it while avoiding civilian casualties. If we were to take military action inside of Mexico and other countries, we would face a Gaza-like situation where they would use human shields and it would get into political warfare. This is a down payment on seriousness that I think hopefully helps. And definitely, as a family that has suffered a loss of a family member to fentanyl, I am deeply grateful for this administration being serious about pushing back against this scourge.
Yeah.
Well,
so
Steve, I know you
important.
lost your Your beautiful daughter, Christina. Democrats are really, really trying to exploit this issue of blowing up these cartel boats. They're trying to distort the optics of it, but there are far too many Americans in this country, like you, who have lost family members to it. Do you anticipate that that message is selling with their Democrat voters, or do you think that those folks also see, the Steve Yates of the world who have lost family members, and they sympathize with what the Trump administration is doing to protect Americans?
Well, I speak about it because I am blessed to have friends like you that will allow me to speak from time to time. And it's an uncomfortable conversation for people to listen to, but I want people to feel uncomfortable about this. We should feel deeply uncomfortable about 500,000 American young lives being stolen from us. And whether it comes from China, the cartels, or anywhere, we should be deeply, deeply uncomfortable about this and motivated to help our government in any way, shape, or form to push back. I think that the Democrats are really at sea, literally and figuratively, when it comes to this issue, because I think to ordinary households, it's just common sense. We shouldn't have illegal floods come into our country and overwhelm our communities and our welfare system, and we shouldn't have illegal narcotics coming in and killing huge numbers of our young people. And if our government can take care of it beyond our shores, it's better to fight the battle there than to have to do it in our own streets. So I mean, I may be the wrong person to ask because it's what I want to believe also, but I happen to believe it's true.
Yeah, it has been chemical warfare on the United States, and you have been so bold in speaking out. I know it's personal, but it's also good strategy and good policy to have brought this on. Steve Yates, Senior Research Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Great to have you on the show today. Thanks for joining us, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you both.
Yeah, what a great conversation. All right, folks, coming up next, more updates on getting accountability for those who weaponize the justice system, as well as an update on a deadly raid involving the ATF. We're going to tackle both of them with my good friend, Bud Cummings, right after these messages. Hey, folks, as an investigative journalist, I've spent my career digging into the facts, cutting through noise, asking hard questions, and getting to the truth. And when it comes to who I recommend to my audience, I hold everyone to the same standard. That's why I want to tell you I've done the homework, and AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens, is the real deal. AMAC is a conservative alternative to AARP. They're focused on faith, family, and freedom, and they offer real benefits to their members, myself included, including discounts on travel insurance, in prescriptions, so much more, exclusive resources, and their excellent AMAC magazine. And right now, when you sign up for a 5-year membership, you'll save up to 33%. That's just over $1 a month, a smart investment to stay informed, get real value, and support a cause that matters. Visit amac.us/justnews today. I've done the vetting. Now you can take the next step.